Welcome to Creamer Media's Polity. I am Amy Witherden. I am at the Centre for Policy Studies in Braamfontein to meet with Aubrey Matshiqi and discuss his recent column on the rumoured fracturing of Jacob Zuma's coalition. Aubrey, you say in your column that the tripartite alliance was not meant to last forever. Under what conditions was the alliance founded, and why should it not continue?
Well, firstly, we must not think of the formation of the alliance in terms of a single event or a single meeting at which the alliance partners met and decided to form the tripartite alliance. It is a product of a series of events. It is also a product of a change in theoretical, strategic, and tactical perspectives. But more importantly, it is a product of a change over a period of time in concrete political conditions in the country. To give examples, in the 1940s, the South African Communist Party, which at the time was known as the Communist Party of South Africa, was very strong and very popular, had a very good time politically, especially after the war, and played an important role in worker struggles. Now, contrast that with an ANC Youth League, which had just been formed. And the nationalist impulses were very strong in the ANC and the ANC Youth League at the time. And leaders of the ANC and the ANC Youth League, including people like Lambert, Sisulu, Tambo, and Mandela, did not want to have anything to do with communists because of their nationalist impulses. But in 1946, we had the miners' strike, which at the time was the largest strike ever involving 80,000 miners. And the Communist Party was right at the center of that strike. Now, one of the things the Youth League had to consider is whether they should support the strike and therefore undermine their nationalist perspective by being seen to be supporting communists. And under the influence of Sisulu, they decided to issue a pamphlet in support of the strike. But in the pamphlet, they stressed quite strongly that their support for their strike was support for a nationalist perspective, not for a class perspective in how the struggle should be prosecuted. You fast forward to the 60s, right in the middle of the Cold War. At that time, the ANC has just been banned. Umkhonto weSizwe has just been formed. Attempts have been made by leaders of the ANC, particularly Oliver Tambo, to seek assistance from the West, which assistance they did not get. There were even attempts to seek assistance from China. But the assistance that did come to support the ANC's broader political and military effort came from the Soviet Union. So in that context of the Cold War, the support from the Soviet Union crystallized this alliance between the ANC and the Communist Party. There were other events, a change in political conditions, which crystallized the alliance. So as I said, you must not look at the alliance in terms of a single event or a single meeting at which it was formed. Secondly, you must look at the tripartite alliance in terms of broader alliance politics of the time. Remember, not only were there debates about whether the struggle was essentially a nationalist liberation struggle or whether it was essentially a class struggle. There were also debates about whether the ANC should engage in struggle with other races, with organizations of other races. Once that debate was won, the ANC engaged in other alliances, for instance, with the Congress of Democrats, with the Colored People's Organizations, and the Indian Congresses. So at the time, you had the emergence of broader alliance politics outside the alliance politics of the tripartite alliance, informed by a change in, as I said, theoretical, tactical, and strategic conditions, but also political conditions on the ground. Now, the intention has always been that This is a strategic alliance that was formed to achieve certain historical goals, primarily the goal of defeating apartheid, and beyond that, the goal of creating a democratic society. Now, a democratic society not just in procedural terms, but also in substantive terms. So people after apartheid would not just enjoy political rights, but their material conditions would be altered as a result of achieving the goal of democratizing South African society. And the alliance would then cease to exist once that historical mission is achieved, or once contradictions or differences between different alliance components become so sharp that continuing with the alliance becomes untenable. I suppose some people are beginning to argue that contradictions are sharpening, as a result of which continuing with the alliance is no longer tenable. But if you ask me, the alliance contradictions are not so deep at the moment that you will see a split. I think what we see is primarily what I call contests or fights over who should enjoy ANC, how can I put it, ANC with accrual, so to speak. It's about who should benefit the most from the capture by the ANC of the state. So primarily what you have within the alliance at the moment are contests over who should have control over the state, which political forces in the alliance and within the ANC should be in control of the state, capture the state, and the ends to which the state should be captured.
So it's not really a fracturing as is rumoured, but more sort of internal tensions?
Well, it's both. Remember, in the current context, we're talking of a president of the country who came to power as a result of a coalition, the Zuma coalition. This was not a coalition of principle. So this was not a coalition that was left-wing in content. It was a coalition that came into being in order to achieve the goal of dislodging Thabo Mbeki, which goal was achieved in Polokwane. Because it was not an alliance that is ideologically based and an alliance of principle, you had a hodgepodge of political interests coming together in pursuit of the common goal of removing Thabo Mbeki. Once that goal was achieved, the question that arose was, what then? And it is at the level of the what then that you see the coalition, that is the Zuma coalition, fracturing into its different component factional interests. So while people were united in the goal of removing Thabo Mbeki, not all of them were united behind the goal, firstly, of having Jacob Zuma as president of the country. But more importantly, they are not united over the ends to which the state was captured after Polokwane.
Who or what are the counter-revolutionaries that are supposedly threatening the African National Congress?
Well, I remember an article in the ANC Today, the ANC's online publication of a few years ago, when the ANC was concerned about the emergence of hostile counter-revolutionary forces located outside the ANC. It went as far in that article as mentioning opposition parties. It went as far as mentioning some political commentators. In other words, any individual or groups of individuals or organizations that at the time were perceived to be hostile to the ANC, located outside the ANC, were labeled counter-revolutionary. That still continues to some extent, that any individual or groups of individuals who are seen to be hostile to the ANC are labeled by some as counter-revolutionary forces. The argument I make in the column is that actually the ANC should look inside itself. The alliance should look inside itself for sources of counter-revolution, for me, the threat of counter-revolution probably exists much more inside the alliance and inside the ANC than it does outside the ANC and the alliance. By that I mean that we have forms of political behavior, we have political interests that have emerged since 1994, which objectively are counter-revolutionary, to the extent that the aims of such interests or the goals of such interests have very little to do with delivering a better life for South Africans, but much more to do with pursuing nefarious goals.
What are the implications of an unstable ruling party on South Africa's national security?
Well, we must remember what our context is. Our context is that of single-party dominance. Now, in a context where a single party is as dominant as the ANC is, unavoidably, instability in such a dominant party will be felt in the state and in society broadly. But one of the implications is that instability in the ANC undermines stability in the state. And that has two effects. It undermines the capacity of the state to deliver public goods. And secondly, it may even undermine the capacity of the state to deliver national security. But there's also a transnational dimension. We have currently in the world what I call the globalization of criminal activity and other activities that constitute threats to states and citizens. Now, in a country where a single party is as dominant as the ANC is, instability in that country, if it undermines the capacity of the state to deliver national security, that failure to deliver national security might find expression in that state becoming a threat to the national security of other states.
Thank you, Aubrey.
You're welcome.